Welcome to this training. Today, the topic is comfort is a deathbed. Let's do a quick preview really quick. We're going to talk about the lies of modernity, why these lies matter, the comfort trap. We'll look at Mr. Average and what his life is like. We'll talk about why challenges are necessary. We'll give some basic heuristics of an action-oriented philosophy, and then finally, we'll end with a practical guide of things you can start doing. Let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the lies of modernity. There are two big ones. The first one is that things always get better. Now, in reality, civilizations decline and they collapse. This usually happens from a combination of two things. First, there's external pressure, but more important, there's always external pressure. That's the nature of the world. But the more important factor is the internal weakness, the internal entropy of society that makes it so that that sort of external pressure can no longer be resisted. That makes it so that the external pressure overcomes and supersedes that society. Now, interestingly, quote unquote stable societies are often the most susceptible to this. They're most prone to decay because they've been successful, because they've been able to maintain themselves for so long in a certain way. They're less likely to adapt and change. They think that because what they've been doing for so long has worked, that it will continue to work forever. That is rarely the case. And you see this quite often where these stable long-term societies suddenly collapse overnight. Probably one of the most famous examples was dynastic China, where you had this long string of emperors for thousands of years, more or less maintaining the same system, the Mandarin feudal system. And the British come in like the 1700s and the Chinese laugh them off. And then the British show up 100 years later with steam engines and modern guns. And it took decades to overthrow the Chinese emperors. So a system that lasted thousands of years quickly collapsed in a few decades. Now, the second lie that we often hear is that better is simply a combination of convenience and comfort. And this is more or less echoed throughout all of modern society, where we equate better with easier. Now, think about the way we've arranged all of society to make ourselves more comfortable, to make life more convenient. And in this sense, we often equate morality with making other people's lives easier and more at ease. But this is often misguided because it often creates what's known as iatrogenic harm. It creates long-term harm as a consequence of something that's well intended. So oftentimes when we try to make other people's lives easy, we end up setting them back over the long term. Think about somebody who spoils their children, who never has their children do chores or doesn't really force their child to keep up with their homework. They set them back over the long term simply so that they can make them comfortable in the moment. Now let's talk a little bit more about why these lies matter. Well, firstly, these lies will keep you dependent on people in power. People in power, quite honestly, they would love for you to be weak. It's very easy to rule over sheep. It's very difficult to rule over lions, very easy to rule over sheep. So you get this case in modern society, places like Minneapolis, where the cops won't arrest violent criminals, but instead they'll command peace-loving citizens to stay indoors and to basically give up their possessions in case they are confronted by a violent thug. So by being weak, you become dependent not only on people in power, but you become a victim of people in power. And you become a victim of kind of ferals. But being weak more or less makes you easily controllable. And in every aspect of your life where you are dependent on someone else, that aspect becomes a pain point or a leverage point where they can force you to comply. If you get your entire income from one income stream, well, that boss, that platform, they essentially have you by the balls. Same thing, if you are entirely dependent on one person or one organization or one entity for your right to, go outside during a pandemic or whatever, then they can force you to do all sorts of ridiculous things, take experimental drugs and put fabric over your face. Very pointless way to live. More importantly, this kind of lie of modernity where better equals comfort and ease, it makes you fragile. So, on a personal level, avoiding challenges makes you weaker and less capable. The way you become capable, the way you become stronger is by putting yourself through stress. Think of the person who always takes the escalator or elevator. Very quickly they find themselves unable to take stairs. A lot of aging, a lot of when people get older and their body starts to break down, it's simply because they take it easy. There's like the creep of incapability, where instead of carrying 4 bags of groceries into their house, they'll say, "Oh, I'll carry 3." And then a year later it's, "Oh, I'll just carry 2." And then the next year it's one at a time. And then finally, after a decade, they can barely carry a single bag of groceries into their house because they've allowed themselves to take it easy, to go the easy route over and over again as a matter of habit. So we need reasonable amounts of stress, challenges, and difficulty in our lives to maintain our capabilities. And this applies to all realms of life, be it physical, mental, social, financial. You need to subject yourself to stress in order to discipline yourself, in order to condition yourself to be able to take on challenges. Now, eliminating friction creates an avalanche of problems. Societies which engender weakness eliminate their own competitiveness, they eliminate their own source of excellence in respect to other cultures and the natural world. Of course, there is a balance to be had. All comfort is not bad, especially when it enables you to do greater challenges. Think of somewhere like Singapore. It was this very hot, damp Southeast Asian country, and it's very difficult to do mental work whenever you're sweating your balls off, right? Whenever you feel entirely physically uncomfortable, it's very difficult to sustain mental concentration over a long period of time. And a big part of their development was installing air conditioning. It was creating environments where people could focus on administrative tasks, where people could focus on long term planning, as opposed to what can I do to get cool right now. So, some comfort is good when it allows you to accept and take on bigger tasks. But there is the comfort trap that we need to be aware of. And this happens on all levels of life. Think about the food system. Fast food and delivery is very popular right now, but this increases metabolic and thyroid disorders. And in the environment, driving and taking public transportation everywhere has led to an increase of obesity and muscular decay. Entertainment overload is a real thing where people are constantly entertained and thus they lose the ability to sustain focus. Ask any, you know, long-term teacher about kids' attention spans over the last 10, 15 years. It's plummeted. And now you have it to the point where college professors are teaching basic arithmetic, basic algebra to incoming freshmen. And the same thing with social safety, right? Social risk aversion creates more shyness and the ability to and the inability to face discomfort socially leads to the inability to have difficult conversations. And whenever you can't have these conversations, when you can't approach strangers, when you can't have easy conversations with people, where you can't easily have difficult conversations, then you reduce your opportunities throughout the course of your life. You meet fewer people, you encounter fewer opportunities. Now, most people are average by definition, but let's look at what average is like today. In terms of their body, you have people who are fat or skinny fat. They're uncoordinated. They have weak core strength and poor posture and typically have bad eyesight. All of these are the result of being stuck indoors, of not doing a lot of physical activity, of, sitting in the same lounging position for hours upon end. You have high visceral fat, which, leads to all sort of a huge indicator of early mortality. Reliance on medication, right? Heart medication, anxiety medication, all of these medications that people take to basically eliminate or try to mitigate lifestyle conditions that they've accumulated. Same thing, Mr. Average has an average mind. He's mentally frail. He's unable to control his emotions. He, flies off the handle or he accepts being pushed around. There's a constant need for escapism, things like video games and mass media entertainment and scrolling. He's basically an NPC being fed his opinions by the hive, so to speak. His career, right? His career is a very middling profession. There's no sense of meaning or purpose in his life. He's basically a tax cattle. He knows it, he accepts it. He's just happy to do his part by paying taxes. And in culture, he's cucked, right? You have a culture where he's lost the reins, he's lost the ability to influence his own society. You have, hip hop and stuff like this who has infiltrated the culture. Various media owners, we'll call them that, media owners have influenced the culture. He's being invaded. His culture is being invaded by foreigners, right? People from the third world, Muslim countries, that sort of thing. And I have nothing against Muslims, but there's plenty of Muslim countries. They do just fine there. They don't need to move to the West except for the purpose of invading and imposing their own culture on the West. And again, in terms of culture, you have celebrity and idol worship. You have belief cues, often malignant belief cues from the media about what constitutes femininity and masculinity and what is a good person and all of these things. All of these have rendered Mr. Average kind of pathetic. So let's move on and let's talk about why challenge is necessary. The first reason is you need to become anti-fragile. Now, all natural systems are anti-fragile. That means that they gain strength from stress. They grow in strength and capability from challenge. Think about a tree. A tree standing in a forest doesn't get a lot of wind. It's prone to collapsing over time. A tree standing in a meadow that is constantly being battered by the wind, constantly facing the storms by itself, it ends up growing taller. It ends up becoming much sturdier and thicker. The same thing happens in any sort of natural system. Think about going to the gym. The way you get stronger, the way you build muscles is by subjecting your muscles to stress. This is how growth happens. Character development is the exact same way. The goal isn't necessarily to get strong. It's to become a strong person. It's to become the sort of person who can face difficulties. And it's important to remember that building this sort of capable character can only come via embracing discomfort. More importantly, perhaps, it's creating a life arc and an interesting story for your life. A life of comfort creates a very boring life with few highlights or milestones. Nobody wants to hear about your life story when all you did was sit around and lounged about, tried to be as comfortable as possible throughout your entire life. We naturally gravitate towards stories of people who did interesting and challenging things that required them to grow through adversity. Adventure and accolades thus require periods of strength and suffering. And because of this, adventure and accolades require periods of suffering and sustained challenge. There's also the personal sovereignty aspect. Comfort and ease always comes at a cost, and it's dependency and weakness. To become self-sustaining, you must be willing to take on challenges and do things that are difficult, often for prolonged periods of time. And finally, there's cultural revitalization. The culture that prioritizes comfort is a culture that is in terminal decline. Cultural rejuvenation, on the other hand, requires that Now, a culture that prioritizes comfort is a culture that prioritizes comfort above a culture a culture that can A culture that prioritizes comfort above all else is a culture that's in terminal decline. We've already gone over plenty of examples of this, but just look at the modern world. Look at the state of the West right now. You have these kind of dopey Mr. Averages who are able to do nothing to preserve their culture, nothing to ascend their civilization. Instead, you just have them shrugging their shoulders as they go about their day while their cultures become erased essentially. It's very pathetic. So, cultural revitalization requires the valorization of struggle and sacrifice. You can't simply valorize strength because strength is the product of struggle. You have to really put a priority, put a premium, put a value to embracing challenges as a, something to look up to, as something to aspire to, a challenging life as something to, you know, um, idolize in a way. So let's move on to that. Let's talk about the heuristics of an action oriented philosophy. Now, these are questions that you should ask yourself. The first one is stronger versus weaker. In any course of action, ask yourself, will this course of action make me stronger, more anti fragile, or will it make me weaker? Will it make me more prone to being uh, suffering catastrophic loss from a minor bump? And the reversal, of course, is inaction. There's always reversals to this because we naturally gravitate towards and we have a bias towards action. When something happens, we want to react to it. But sometimes the best thing to do is not to react at all. It's to let things run their course. You saw this with the scamdemic, right? Governments all around the world, they're shutting things down and forcing people inside. When in reality, probably the best course of action was just to let people get sick, build up natural immunity, go on with your business, don't destroy your economy, don't destroy people's social abilities. But we did because, politicians have elections to win, they have constituents to please, and doing something often looks and sounds better than doing nothing, even whenever it's counterproductive. The next question to ask yourself, is it getting me closer or further from my goals? So ask yourself, will this course of action bring me closer to or further from my goals? And of course, there is always the elimination of this, and of course, there's a reversal here, and that is elimination. Because a lot of times, getting closer to your goals isn't necessarily about doing more, it's about doing less of the things that are distracting you. Like, I've cut out tons of people from my life. I've cut out tons of activities in my life because I knew that's the only way I would be able to truly focus on the things that matter, the things that truly orient myself towards my goals. I'm a very prolific person. I like to be active. So I have to really check myself and make sure that I'm not doing things that are spreading myself too thin in order to, I have to do less to get to my goals in a way, which is a very counterintuitive sort of thought. The next one is creating an interesting life story. Ask yourself, will this course of action create an interesting life story? Now, again, sometimes you just have to let things play out. You can't stage manage your entire life. So sometimes you have to, let the cards fall where they may, pick them up afterwards, which can be quite interesting in and of itself, but it takes a degree of resilience to do that, to allow that to happen without scrambling to try to control everything. And the last heuristic is becoming indomitable. You need to ask yourself, will this course of action make me more or less independent? And of course, there is a reversal here, and that's allowing other people to take the spotlight. Because again, our natural tendency is to micromanage, it's to do everything for everyone, but this stunts the people around us and it creates resentment. Think about the sort of parent who does everything for their child, right? Ties their shoes and all this kind of uh, hover parent sort of stuff, helicopter parent sort of stuff. They really stunt the development of their children in that way. Employers will do this too, managers and bosses, business owners, will they do too much for their employees rather than expecting more. So sometimes to become indomitable, you have to allow those around you to grow as well so that you can build a community that is resilient and anti-fragile. And this gets me to the practical aspects. First, you need to build your body, obviously. Exercise. Go to the gym, do some cardio, do some combat sports, do coordination drills. Don't ignore any of these. Don't become one of these people who, like the gym cell, who is way too big and can't move. Or don't become the guy who's just always jogging and then you're kind of skinny fat, you have no muscle tonality. Have some variety to it. Also, don't ignore your diet. Fasting is excellent. It clears out toxins and damaged cells. Another important thing is to reduce late night snacking. And again, to elimination. Get rid of the stuff that's no good for you. Junk food, processed food, weird packaging with chemicals in it, seed oils. These sort of things are making you weaker, whether you realize it or not. Next, build skills. Become well rounded. Think of somebody like James Bond. he's not just good at one thing, right? He can drive fast cars, he dresses well, he flirts well, he probably, bangs well, he can shoot a gun, he can do a lot. He can build bombs, disarm bombs, all sorts of stuff. Become well rounded, become the Bruce Wayne, not like the narrow niche guy. And most importantly, be practical with it. Like, do things that actually improve your life and move the needle in terms of helping you become healthier, more well rounded, more capable. And focus on skills that actually help other people. Cooking is a pretty exceptional skill. Or cooking is not necessarily exceptional, but it's very useful to be able to cook healthy food for yourself and for your loved ones. Same thing, operating machinery, survival capabilities, repair capabilities, social and communication skills. These are all underappreciated skills in the modern world. Next one is to build your mind. Focus on things like meditation, reflection, journaling, prayer, and increase the frame rate and resolution of your perception. The frame rate is, how able you are to perceive movement in time, and resolution is how granular or detailed you can perceive the world. Now that's a little bit abstract, but think about it and you'll figure out a way to do it. Next one is build culture. Strength in isolation is limited to what you yourself can do. Having a community of support is a force multiplier, and having a community of capable support is even more of a force multiplier. You don't want to be king of the losers, right? You don't want to be king of the incapable. You want to have a tribe of people, of men around you who embody capability, who do have strength, honor, mastery, courage, and skills. Ancient Greece, for example, was arranged into independent fiefdoms that were bound together by mutual defense pacts. Think of your own social circle in this way. You don't necessarily have to subsume your life into other people. You don't have to join some hippie commune, but you do want people around you who have your back and who are able to contribute to your life. Likewise, you should be able to do that for other people. Think of different forms of modern mutual aid. You could join or start a mastermind or a fitness club, a study group, or you could simply have meals together. Now, finally, as a CTA, I'm going to start an online community. It's going to be for people who see personal development as a means of cultural revitalization and rebellion against the modern kind of woke elite. We're going to discuss important topics with like-minded people in a private environment. You'll be able to find accountability partners or take part in live masterminds and study groups. While that's not ready yet, you can, subscribe to my Substack and I'll send you a notice whenever that's ready. Now you can try the Harada Hero app. This is the best habit tracker today. It's everything you need to be able to set big goals, establish habits, gain insights with stats, log progress with a journal, track metrics, and utilize accountability partners. And it has nothing you don't need. There's no weird gamification or like animated characters, none of this weird stuff. It's a very functional habit tracker that is feature rich without the dorky gamification. Basically, it's the habit tracker I wish somebody would build because I did build it. So it's nothing you don't need. It's very useful. I'll put a link below in the description. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I hope you understand that modern life is not here to make your life better. It's here to make you comfortable, and it's here to keep you dependent. And the only way you can overcome that is with the strength of your own mind and through building a community with like-minded individuals.